Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to another Minecraft discussion here on this gorgeous February day. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am just elated to have this discussion with you today. It's about keeping good company, and I've done other various episodes that have touched on this in different ways, and we're really talking about. We even when we're aware and you're ultra aware, we still really can only help so much being influenced by the people around us. So if we have to kind of stay on top of that, even if it's just mild, subtle little stuff, we want to stay on top of that. Plus, we want to make sure that we are spending our life minutes as if they are cash because they are limited. We forget that. We're in the zone, we're in the groove, and we forget that we only have so many life minutes. They are not, infinite on this earth anyway. And we need to be really careful with how we spend these and who we spend these with. And I'm on a Richard Carlson jag right here. My inspiration today is with Richard Carlson, or from Richard Carlson, who's the author of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books. And Richard and I would love to have lunch with him too, as many of you know. Of course, Oprah's my number one. And wow, there's so many great thinkers I've been listening to lately, and it's wild because they're really all saying the same thing, just different voices in different ways, different contexts, but the main themes are really the same with the people who are very, spiritually focused and positivity focused, well-being focused, or they've got, really they're all on the same track. So Richard starts out by saying, I think like most of us acknowledge that we're affected both positively and negatively by those we spend the most time with. I mean, obviously, right? And some of it is, people we don't necessarily have as much choice with, especially, kids and teenagers, sometimes young adults who are, with their parents, especially I'm thinking through the pandemic when, thankfully, a lot of young adults came home when they needed to, and we were kind of stuck in that spot, right? And even outside of the pandemic, since that's as far as we know long over by now, hopefully, there's certain, we have to spend time with a certain amount of time with some people, parents, spouses, siblings, sometimes roommates, if you're in college or a young adult out in the world getting started professionally, and then work people. But even within that and that, truth right there, if let's say at the workplace, if somebody's a real negative Nelly, you want to limit that time because that exposure, to me, it's like breathing secondhand smoke. It's kind of like if you want to go, wreck your own lungs, then go right ahead. But I don't want to breathe it, kind of thing. So if somebody wants to go and just whine, complain. Just I don't need to be around that person. We're not talking about listening to a best friend with a crisis, or listen to somebody maybe not your best friend, but somebody's in a genuine something. That's not the same. We're talking about the whiners and complainers that "Rah, rah, rah." It sounds like the Peanuts cartoon. Wah, 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 wah. You want to develop a force field around yourself, like an orb, to protect yourself from that negative infusion. Because I mean, no one needs it. It just sucks the life out of all of us. So, Rich is kind of saying the same thing that I've been saying for years about life minutes and spend them as if they were cash. And in fact, with my mind crafters at Champlain College, where I teach, I actually give them at the end of the semester, I write their name on it and everything, and it's a fake, I think it's $1 million bill. Spend your life minutes as if they're cash because these are limited. And they might laugh when I say it in the beginning of the semester, but when it's all done, they're not laughing anymore. Somebody's got to be worthy of my life minutes. Is you got to somewhat, again, control what you can and let go of what you can't, right? Because you might have a boss you don't like and you got to deal with her no matter what, right? But there's a lot more control to be had than we think. And Richard is basically saying the same thing when he says, your time and energy are among your most precious and important assets. I like the way he uses the word assets because we own these, our life minutes, right? Therefore, it's extremely important to make wise and well thought out choices about who you spend your time with. Do you spend time with people who are truly nourishing you and your family, or do you choose your company more randomly? If you're honest, you might be surprised by your answer. Perhaps Perhaps you're friends with people without really knowing why, or out of laziness, perceived convenience, or simply habit. He is preaching to the choir with that one. Go, Richard. I love how Richard talks about laziness, perceived convenience, or simply habit. This is just the truth. I mean, we are creatures of habit. The brain likes routines, brain likes patterns, and this isn't different with, you know, other habits and also our people habits. Oftentimes we might meet once a month with this friend. We're not saying that they're a bad person. This friend is really an acquaintance, which is a whole nother issue, at least that I have, because in our youngest son reminds me of this a lot. He's got a very crystal clear definition of a friend, and he gives far more meaning to it than a lot of people I know, because sometimes people that you like, they like you, you like them, you have some things in common, but they're really acquaintances. You're not going to call them at 3 o'clock in the morning if you have a crisis and your heart's breaking down the middle. That's not a friend. That's an acquaintance. Doesn't mean we toss them out totally, because we enjoy that. The water cooler talk is fun. The little gatherings you have at work are fun. But the thing is, we want, since our life minutes are limited, we really want to, really focus on the first string, just like a sports team. And those third string people just don't get as much of our time. That's just how it is. And I think I did another episode on a shit giving budget, and that was also part of that. That wasn't the main theme, but you got to attach, like as if you're going to do little slash marks with your life minutes, you know, you gotta focus on the most of those little slash marks go to your first string and then maybe your second string. Not as many to your third string, and certainly not to those sitting on the bench. And as far as the toxics go, they're not even in the gym or the stadium. They're out in the parking lot doing whatever, and they get zero, hopefully. No, so again, Richard and I are on the same page with this one. So then he says something similar, right? So I'm not suggesting that you necessarily break off your friendships and form new ones. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying limited time. If you're going to a club I would also say this to my students. If you're going to a club every week, or you signed up for 3 because you didn't know and you're still in all 3 even though you figured out the one you like and you don't like the other 2, that's a gigantic waste of life minutes. Plus, it's spreading you thin. You can't invest in your energy, your life minutes in the club you actually do like. And for seasoned grown-ups, just, swap over that context for your own context. You go into these PTO meetings all the time when you really don't like it. Okay, so you can be involved with your child's school in another way. That's maybe more in line or more in alignment with your personality and your signature strengths. It doesn't mean to give up stuff. It means to make some shifts, make some changes. Okay, then he says, nor am I suggesting that all friendships based on tradition, obligation, or past experiences are bad or wrong. So you might have history with somebody, okay, but people grow and change. Does it mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say? No. Does it mean you spend less time? Probably yes. Okay, and then he says, I'm simply encouraging you to reevaluate and take an honest look at how you feel when you are with someone and shortly thereafter, especially when you have some decades under your belt, right? So I've got 5 and 8/10 or 8/12, or I don't know, what am I trying to say? 58 years, I don't know, whatever, just short of 6 decades. And you really become aware that there's less time in front of you than behind you, for sure, and that you can, without be you have less tolerance for just doing things on autopilot, because there is no bigger thief of life minutes than autopilot. All different contexts, all different examples, but just spending all this time with somebody that isn't doing anything for you or you for them, it's silly. Again, we're not saying cut them loose entirely if you've had them in your life for a really long time, but you can trim that stuff down. So then he says, is he or she a person you admire and respect? That's huge. If you don't admire and respect them, I'm not sure what the relationship's doing anyway. I mean, that's kind of like a no-brainer. For me, I'm a big loyalty person. If somebody's not loyal, I got no use for you. That's it. And then of course, the trust thing is there too. Loyalty and honesty, they're kind of, for me, they're married to each other. So somebody doesn't have that, they're sort of immediately demoted to water cooler people, because I've got to have real authentic people in my life. It's just how it is. That's for the first string, second string, third string, and on the bench. Still got to be authentic, loyal, and honest. And then he says, "Do you nourish one another?" That's important. if you're sharing your joyful experiences, you're sharing stuff about your families, and you're both listening and actively listening, and being there for one another. And obviously, there's levels of depth. Or acquaintance, or that the third string doesn't know the deets about you that your second string does, which doesn't know the deets about you, which your first string does, knows all your vulnerabilities and what scares you, your dreams, and all that stuff, the different levels, right? But you want to have a mutual nourishment thing going on. Do you have similar values? That's huge, right? Do you feel good about the way you've spent your time in person or on the phone? Do you feel good when you leave the? Now, obviously, things happen in life. People argue, people disagree, blah 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 blah. But in general, do you feel good when you like? Are you charged? Like, wow, I'm so glad I saw that person. I'm so glad at lunch. So glad I made the time for that person. They give you a lift. It's one of my dearest friends will just say we say to each other constantly. It's not even a big story here. It's like we just have lunch or dinner, or sometimes we do a women's overnight, and we say literally each and every time, "Wow, is that so life giving?" We say it was so life giving. Being with girlfriends weekend, and we come back as better spouses, better mothers, better everything. And if that's happening for you, then you're on a right track. Um, and he said, if not, it doesn't mean you can't still be friends, only that you might want to make the decision to spend less time, just like we've been saying, with that person, which will create the time and space to meet new people or to spend more time alone. So just because we create a gap doesn't mean we need to fill it. And the older we get, I think many of us start to pick that up. Like, wow, I just had a Tuesday morning or a Sunday afternoon by myself. And my younger son also says that a lot. Whenever we shift out of spending our life minutes in one way for another way, it's a swap of energy. So, do you want to give up that snuggly rainy day on a Sunday afternoon with a good book on the couch by yourself to go hang out in a cafe with somebody who doesn't really spark that joy in you? Again, it doesn't mean they're a bad person, but why would you give up that golden time to rejuvenate, to do something you don't really want to do? No, 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 no. So, remember, we're not talking about judging people. We're not saying that they're a bad person. We're not saying that their values aren't as good as our values, or they're just different. Okay. And people do grow and change, hopefully. I mean, that's what we're on this earth for, right? Is to learn how to love ourselves and other people. And sometimes, especially after, a couple or a few decades go by, you just sometimes go in different directions. Again, not meaning anybody's bad, but you just start to get your interests might change. And it again, it doesn't mean to cut somebody loose totally necessarily. Maybe so, if they're toxic, definitely. But it might just mean that, to really pay attention to who you're being attracted to. And I don't mean attracted in a romantic way necessarily. I use that word a lot, especially, the universal law of attraction. I mean, what we attract people who have very similar interests, and we got to also be mindful of that, because I can go and, in a group think sort of way, can also go not a good way. Let's say politically, when we're kind of ignoring the whole other side, so we make more educated choices. We're not talking about that. We're talking about in an authentic sense. We tend to attract and be attracted to people that are sort of along the same, spiritual and authentic path that we are. So sometimes that other person just isn't there yet. Just like it happens to us, maybe we're not there yet with it's somebody else, and we're not spending as much time with them right now. But it's kind of like you can only fake that stuff so long, because when we allow ourselves to get pulled down, and the word is down, when it's into negativity, because the high vibe emotions are all very, very positive. So if the only way we can relate to that person is to allow ourselves to kind of sink into this low vibe mode, that is an unhealthy situation. Again, we're not talking about genuinely actively listening to your best friend or a very good friend whose heart's breaking. Different. When we allow ourselves to getting sucked down into relating to somebody that's in a judgy way, because we're used to feeling guilty, because we're used to feeling like a victim, because people do this all the time, because we get this immediate fix of feeling like we're fitting in or something, and like their story was how they weren't treated well, then we come up with the similar one, well, how we weren't treated well, and then a third person chimes in, and then all of a sudden our vibe is completely lowered just to relate to these two people, which is not what we want to be doing. It's a gigantic waste of life minutes. It goes nowhere and just, kind of, bumps us off that high flying disc that we want to sail on. I'm a very, 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 very extroverted person, and so I therefore charge my batteries, um, when I'm with a lot of other people, and I like when I do presentations at various colleges and universities, including Champlain, of course, and that's my home base there. So I mean, I just get so charged up. Though I truthfully have become more cognizant of my alone time at a fabulous 58, because even as an extrovert, I really need some, and I've really grown to value the time when I have. Maybe it's a remote day. I'm able to really plan stuff and plug away. And there's so much satisfaction in that when I can plan workshops at home with the fire going, a little Giovanni, our golden retriever right here, or to have time out in the woods with him alone. So like I just need that, and we all need that. And so we need to really think that if we want to give that up to spend time with somebody that we're really not, sort of having any kind of mutual fulfillment from and with, right? And Richard says that he says I've met hundreds of people I really like for a variety of reasons, but would much rather not spend time with. Again, because they're not bad people, they're just not doing it for you, right? He said, for the most part, he said, my guess is that most of those people feel the same way about me. He said, I love to spend time alone, and if I'm going to be with someone else, I'd like it to be with someone I truly enjoy being with. This is it. So we want to spend your life minutes as if they are cash. Therefore, be very cognizant, very aware of the company you keep. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from the beautiful northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.